Welcome everyone, KD here, and this is my tutorial about the material editor part 2. And in this part it is all about textures and textures map. Before we start with that, I want to make one small correction from part 1 and give you an additional information. First, the correction is you can go higher than 1 with the value for emissive colors, and then you get a much brighter light if you go higher with the number. However, with roughness and so on, you won't change much by going higher than 1. There is the range from 0 to 1, and with the light it's from 0. So I have now 10. I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure how much higher you can get. That's something you have to test for yourself. But 0 is nothing, no light emission, and then 1 is a small light emission, and then as higher you number, as brighter it gets, of course. The second information I want to give you is about specular. So I read from some people that you shouldn't play around with the specular because specular is already on the is set like in real life, whatever that means, and instead you should use ambient occlusion and set ambient occlusion to 1 if you don't want any reflection and on 0 if you want reflection. So now this is not official, and I read also other things like who people tell try to change the specular and so on. Also, I mean, specular is set like it's real. It means if you're not going for photorealistic, it may still not be the right setting for you. So, but take this as you want. So I don't heard anything official. I think if it's in here and you can change it, then and you find a better setting with a different specular number, then why not changing it if you feel it looks better. Also, you can easily put it back to default by just deleting any number that comes in here. So that's just what I wanted to say. Now we go to how you can implement textures and textures map. So before we go into the material editor, I want to show you this little guy here I created from scratch. I did the 3D mesh, I did all the texture painting and so on this guy here. So for this tutorial I won't show you how to paint your own texture. Painting texture is it would extend the complete tutorial way too much, and there are too many things to it. I mean, maybe you don't want to have drawn texture, you maybe want to go photorealistic and so on, so there's way too much to it, and it would extend this tutorial too much. I of course will then pick up texture drawing and other things in other tutorial parts if you are interested. Anyway, for this part we will look how we can create this, how we can use these different textures in different ways with the material editor. So you already see on this guy here we have different types of use of textures, like the tail is different, the fur you see on the legs and so on has different settings. That's why I want to show you this guy, and I probably will use will show him more when I need him for other examples and so on, at least until I create something else, something I like more. So with that, let's jump into the material editor and let's go through everything that is important for the basics. Okay, I now created a new material, or actually I didn't create a new one, I just take the new material from part 1. If you didn't watch part 1, just add new and then material to create a new material. And you see here I uploaded also some textures and textures map. Here we have the diffuse texture. This is just a color a color texture. I use 2 colors so I can show you different things. Then here we have a height map of a very simple, some really simple form. The same here with a normal map. So I will show you the difference between normal map and height map and how you can use them in the material editor. I created also another height map, but I probably will only show this one. And then we have texture maps. Texture maps can be used for different things, for different settings. You will see. I just, for showing you the effect of them, I just chose black and white. However, these texture maps can also have gray in it and or have a transition between white and black, but they just have to be colorless. So let's go into the material editor and I will show you how you can use this material. So first the main colors scheme, the diffuse color. For that we have to create a node texture sample. Where is it? Here, texture sample. There are different types of texture sample, but you can just use the normal one. And in the texture sample, now on the left we have a detailed option list we can do. Here we can set what type of texture it is. This is color, that's fine. And here we set our diffuse color in, and then we connect this with the base color. Save this and we will see. And we see now our 2 colors. We see here a preview. You can, by the way, change the previews, but then we have to wait a moment until it's loaded again. And here it is how it looks on our material. So if you have a neutral object and you just put on texture, it will just put every text, just fill out every face of the object with the texture. If you want to have a specific texture for a specific object, you need to create an UE4 map, and you have to do this in the 3D modeling part. So this is not part of this tutorial. I just tell you that this is how it will end up looking if you just put the texture on a neutral object without having the texture connected to the UV map of the 3D object. However, we can do some changes in the material editor without us having to go into a 3D modeling to change the texture or even the 3D mesh, and that's what I will show you next. So first, what we can do is, this is from connected to part 1. We can actually add, if we want, not a vertex color. I'm sorry, I'm always doing this. A vector parameter we need. And here, with the vector parameter, I showed you this in the first part. You can choose a color. Let's now say blue. and we can multiply our texture with our parameter and so change the colors. So I had to change the colors, otherwise it just would have been black. This is a little bit difficult with darker texture. I should have done some bright textures, then you would maybe see me better. But you see here, absolutely in the red, you see the difference very good. So you kind of can change the colors if you're not happy with the texture color you have. However, it's better to use this better works with bright textures and with neutral colors. What I mean with neutral colors is white and black and everything between. Like this, it works the best. You can easily do this with a 2D program like Photoshop or GIMP. You can there set the colors, and you can also set the brightness. But for that, we have to do this outside of Unreal Engine. We can, however, also do different things. There is a also dividing option, so maybe you can take away the color. I never really use this because, like I said, I mostly do this outside of Unreal Engine in a separate software. What you also can do is, I won't do this here probably because it anyway will be black again. Multiply with the same texture. So if you feel like the colors are look a little bit too bright, you don't see it in a good way or something like that. Often it works wonders if you multiply a texture that is a little bit too bright with itself, and you will have better effects. Just for more information, what you now also can do, and what I want to show you, so maybe you want to have this texture multiple times over the same face, and you can do this also in here in the material editor. For this you need simply a texture coordinate, and you put this into U files, and then here you have the U tiling and the V tiling, and here you can set a higher number. I set now this to 1010. You don't have, this doesn't have to be even numbers, but you have to know when you don't use even numbers that the texture will just stretch, and it may not, depending on the texture you use, it may not look good. With this simple texture we have here, it probably wouldn't be a big problem. But let's just to demonstrate what the effect is using 1010. And we see now here we have this texture multiple time. So sadly we don't see it in the V direction. Very good. I should have taken 4 colors maybe. Then we would have seen it well, but I hope you can still imagine how it would like. So we also tilt this texture in the V direction, not only in the U direction. But you see, so you can multiply very simple your texture. For what can you use that? If you have a neutral object that has a texture you want to have, but the texture is way too big, you can use it very simple like this. As example, a brick wall or something like that. So you can put the texture over the brick wall and then use the texture coordinate to find the right size so it looks good on your game. Also, if you don't use landscape or anything like that, and you have just a normal floor like here, then also here You can do it and multiply it until you're happy with the result. So this is a very important feature I actually often use. The next thing is maybe a little bit playing around, but I still want to show you this because it's another interesting feature, and that's to add motion to your texture. So let's not delete this. Maybe we wanna use this again. What we now will use is a so-called panner node. It looks like this, and we put this in the new files. And here on the left side we see again more options, and what we can do now is here saying the speed the texture should have in X direction and the speed it should have in Y direction. Let's put in here 2 and 1 in here, and then we see immediately the result. And we see now we have here motion in. It's already pretty fast, to be honest, and we see also here see movement. So for what do we need this? As example, if you have a river or something like that and you want to have a texture that moves and shows the stream, you can use this as example for a horror game if the walls move around or anything like that. Or you see here you can use it for something, some kind of drug trip or anything like that. So there's a couple of use for this, and that's why I'm showing you this, because it can be very useful to have something like that. Also, I don't know if you have some kind of magic spells or anything like that, and you want to have some kind of seal or anything like that that moves around. It's very easy to do it with textures like this. Very simple, it's just one more node. Of course, you can put in here also constants, and here in coordinates you can also add our texture coordinates, and so we can multiply our texture, and that's how it will then look like. See here the new effects if you have multiple textures. That's for the first parameter, the base colors. Let's go further. Let's see how we can create metallic, specular, and roughness, or emissive color. Also with texture maps. So for that we create a new texture sample. Here, texture sample, and we add in let's do first our texture maps, now white and black, and I will add this to metallic, and you will see the effect in a moment. And you see now the red part is now metallic, the one that overlays with 1, and the black part is still normal. So we could have just put in, like I showed you in part 1, with a constant, and do this 1 to metallic, and then everything, the whole material will be metallic. However, with a texture sample like this, the advantage is that you can choose which parts of your material should be metallic. In this example, the red part, and we don't want the black part to be metallic. This is useful if you have, as example, a character that I don't know, with a leather jacket, and on the leather jacket there are some metallic parts or something like that, and then with this function you can put everything in one material, and you don't have to do multiple material for the metallic part and the leather part or anything like that. So you can make these texture maps like this, and the coding actually is pretty simple. And I say coding because it is kind of code, because white stands for 1, black stands for 0, and everything gray between is then a number between 1 and 0. So for using this texture sample, you have to know what does 1 do, what does 0 do. In this case, 1 it means full metallic, 0 means not metallic. And with specular we have on 0 almost no reflection, and on 1 full reflection. Roughness is 1, we have a smooth texture, and 0 we have a smooth texture, and 1 we have a very rough texture. That's just the thing you have to know. So let's use specular and roughness to make one side to a mirror. For that, so let's remove the metallic one. For that we need another texture sample. And this time we take the map 2 that is reversed, put this into roughness, and I will save this. And we see now here this way we made the red side almost like a mirror, and the green side is still rough and has almost no reflection. So again, if you want to create a material with multiple different surfaces, and some are rougher than the others, and so and some are reflecting like a mirror, you can do this here. And of course you can also use it for other things like emissive colors. And we see now that we have a white light here. So in other words, we can also use for emissive colors our texture sample if we want to have different colors. And we see now that we have a white light here. So in other words, we can also use for emissive colors our texture sample if we want to have different colors. And we see now we have now lit our complete texture. And with this can also make a map. If you have, I don't know, maybe something mechanic and there's a little lamp somewhere that is lit up, then you create a black background, and then the color you want the light to be, you do this part with the color you want the light to be, and then you can set the map separately in here. So black, there won't be any light coming out, and then depending on the color you want, you can have white, you can have red, green, and so on. So next thing I want to show you is about the normal map. Let's move this one here back. So maybe first, what is a normal map? A normal map and also a height map. I will show you how to work with a height map later. A normal map gives us the illusion that a flat object is not flat, but has some depth in it and some things that maybe come out to it. But the 3D object itself is completely flat. So for what can we use this is for complicated surfaces with different heights, with depth in it, without having to do difficult 3D meshes. We can use very simple 3D meshes. What the thing you just have to know that this effect has some limits, so it's more used. It should more be used for small height and depth differences and not massive height and depth differences. If you have really like a cone or something that comes out of your object or anything like that, then you're better off by doing this in 3D, just as information. But I will show you the effect we can do with normal maps. So I will use our normal map. That's the name here. And we see here, luckily, this time Unreal Engine immediately recognized it as a normal map. Sometimes it won't do this. Absolutely, if you create your normal maps on your own, sometimes it just doesn't recognize it. Most of the time it's not a big deal, but if you want to change it, you can do it here on the sample type and just set normal. And we see now with the normal map added, we have here this stamp forms, these different geometries that go inside of the surface, even when the surface is completely flat. That's the power of normal maps. However, you see this has some limits. It's not extremely immense deep inside. It's just I like to say it's kind of like an illusion that it goes inside, and it mostly works with shading, to be honest. But this is also something very useful. You will probably use often normal maps just to make most of your more complex textures and objects looking more realistic and better. So now if you don't want to have it going inside, but instead looking up, but not like stamps going inside but looking up, then you have to rotate your normal map. You can do this if you go into your 2D software like Photoshop or GIMP and rotate it there, but you can also do it in here. That's what I want to show you. This is called custom rotator, and you put this in UE4. Now you see here three different inputs. The lowest one, the rotation angle, you can fill this with a constant, and the angle is from 0 to 1. 0, 0 is 0 degrees, 1 is 360 degrees. So if we want 180 degrees, we have to do it with 0.5. If we want 90 degrees, 0.25. So we have then the rotation center. We want it in the middle of our object, and we see here it needs two vectors. So we take, instead of the normal constant, the constant with two vectors. And here we have two numbers, and we want the rotation in the center of our texture. So we press 0.5, 0.5 for the center. So 0, 0 would be one side of the texture, and 1, 1 would be the other side of the texture, or one corner, and 1, 1 would be the opposite corner. So the UVs we could put in here now also a constant 2 vector, or that was not, or we use our texture coordinates. This also fits in here. It's important that you fill all the numbers, otherwise it won't work. So now we have to be careful. We have here 10, 10. Let's set this 1, 1 for now. Save this. And we see now that instead of going inside, these geometries come outside. It looks like they're coming to you. So this is pretty useful. You just have to know that depending if something goes inside or outside is based on the color code you use in here in the for normal maps. So what you, of course, you can also, you don't have to put in here 1 to 1. You can tile this same way we did it with the texture multiple times. So I can say 10, 10, and then we have multiple. We will set this multiple times over the same surface. I won't do this now, it's not necessary. Let me delete all of this. Now we can do the same effect we have with the normal map, also do with a height map. Maybe for some reason you don't have a normal map, you only have a height map. A height map is black and white, not in colors. Or maybe you want to create a simple normal map yourself, or a simple depth or height illusion on a surface on your own, and you want to create this on your own in your 2D software like GIMP or Photoshop. Then it's much easier, instead of doing a normal map that has 5 different colors, to do this in with a height map that only uses black and white and gray shadings. It's a lot easier. So how can you use a height map? I will show you this here. There is a function that is called first have to find it, height normal from height map. That's what we want, and the result we will put in here. Now we have here a couple of functions. The one we want to use is height map, the top one. However, here we can't use texture sample, we need a texture object. And we use here our height map. You see, height maps are just black and white. Black means something is further away from the person that looks at, and white is closer to him. So black gives us depth, and white gives us height. And we see we end up to have a similar result like with the normal map. So now here, if you want to change it from going deep to going high, you have to go into the 2D software and invert the colors so you can change that. What you also can do, but also another advantage by using height maps instead of normal maps, except for it's easier to create them on your own, is you can set the normal map intensity. You can do this easily with a constant and set the constant. The default value is 8, and if you take less, then it's less intense, so it looks not as deep or as high. And if you go higher, you will do more intensity. You just have to know, I won't show you that now, you can test this for your own. You just have to know that if you go too high, the intensity works mostly with the shading. So if you go too high, then you just have an extreme high contrast between dark shading and light shading, and it may not look well anymore. But so just so you know. Then you can set UE4 offset, so it's not from the center, and you can also set coordinates. Coordinates, as example, you can take your texture coordinates and do the tilling back to 10, so we will get more stamps than before. And we already see it here in the preview that we have now more stamps, and we can go in here and see the same thing on our surfaces. Here it is correct. I had before already the feeling that here it's a little bit wrong. Here it clearly comes to the outside. It looks now a little bit like Lego. Now there is a fifth function, height map channel selector. I never used this. It seems like, you see here, UE4. This means you need to use a constant 4 vector, and that's something I never used before. You can test it out for your own. What you also can do is, of course, setting a panel here also to coordinates. You know what, I won't use a panel, I will use something else. Just so I showed you this too, you can select the rotator and put this in here, and you see here similar values we used before for the custom rotator. We take the center by 0.05 and the speed 0.25. You can also put the speed, by the way, to minus, then it rotates to the odd. And we already see it here in the preview that we have now more stamps, and we can go in here and see the same thing on our surfaces. Here it is correct. I had before already the feeling that here it's a little bit wrong. Here it clearly comes to the outside. It looks now a little bit like Lego. Now there is a fifth function, height map channel selector. I never used this. It seems like, you see here, UE4. This means you need to use a constant 4 vector, and that's something I never used before. You can test it out for your own. What you also can do is, of course, setting a panel here also to coordinates. You know what, I won't use a panel, I will use something else. Just so I showed you this too, you can select the rotator and put this in here, and you see here similar values we used before for the custom rotator. We take the center by 0.005 and the speed 0.25. You can also put the speed, by the way, to minus, then it rotates to the odd. And we see here now it's rotating like crazy. And we also see here how it's rotating. And of course, if you want the texture itself also to rotate, you can also connect this into this UE4, or you can create something new, something different. Maybe you want the texture to move differently, and so on. So that's how you use normal maps and height maps. There is one more thing I want to show you, and that is the opacity mask. So let's get rid of all of this. We keep our texture sample. We can take our second texture sample here. We will need this. So you can now select nothing, or also put on the output node, press on the output node, and then we get here detailed information. And I told you already in part 1 that I showed you then the translucent texture. Now I want to show you the mask texture. So here in the mask texture, you can do all the things we did before. Set metallic, specular, roughness, emissive color, and of course also normal maps. But what we also can now add is opacity mask. I will do this, edit here, save it. Now what is the opacity mask? Opacity mask, it needs a black and white map, and here it's important that you can't use any gray or anything between. It only works with black and white. Everything that is black will be invisible, everything that is white will be visible. And we see here now it's rotating like crazy. And we also see here how it's rotating. And of course, if you want the texture itself also to rotate, you can also connect this into this UE4, or you can create something new, something different. Maybe you want the texture to move differently, and so on. So that's how you use normal maps and height maps. There is one more thing I want to show you, and that is the opacity mask. So let's get rid of all of this. We keep our texture sample. We can take our second texture sample here. We will need this. So you can now select nothing, or also put on the output node, press on the output node, and then we get here detailed information. And I told you already in part 1 that I showed you then the translucent texture. Now I want to show you the mask texture. So here in the mask texture, you can do all the things we did before. Set metallic, specular, roughness, emissive color, and of course also normal maps. But what we also can now add is opacity mask. I will do this, edit here, save it. Now what is the opacity mask? Opacity mask, it needs a black and white map, and here it's important that you can't use any gray or anything between. It only works with black and white. Everything that is black will be invisible, everything that is white will be visible. And you see now that everything that was red before, we can't see anymore. We can also go here and we see through everything that was red before. There are just the important thing is that the object is still there, just so you know, because of collision or anything like that. The object is still there. You just don't see everything. For what can you use this? For quite different things. As example, for foliage, if you make a tree and you don't want to create every single leaf out of a mesh, you can use a picture or anything like that of a leaf with a black background and keep the leaf white, and then you can make every single leaf create a quite complex form, leaf form, with a very simple mesh, because you just can use a plane if you want to. I would just suggest not to use a plane, but use give it some kind of thickness to it, so Unreal Engine will show it correctly. And that's the main use if you have very complex forms and maybe very repetitive complex forms, like leaves or maybe grass or anything like that. Then you can create this with very simple forms and use opacity mask to make it look like it's almost like cut out. You can also use this for fur, you can use this for human hair, absolutely facial hair and things like that. It's very useful for different things. You can also add something like damage to your clothing or something like that, that there is somewhere a part missing of the clothes and things like that, without having to create a hole in the mesh itself for your clothes and things like that, and so on. So I use opacity mask actually a lot, and I would recommend you to also to try this out with the opacity mask, and I'm pretty sure you will find a use for it, depending of course the project you want to do. But, I personally really use it often. So now that's what I want to show you for this part, for the texture and texture map. I hope you managed to follow it. If you have still questions, if you have problem by replicating anything, please use the comment section. I will try to answer all your questions. And for the third part, we will go a step further than we have here now. It's always a step further. So in the first part, we only use the material editor without anything coming in from the outside. Now in the second part, we use texture and texture maps that we create in a separate software, 3D modeling or 2D software. And I showed you how you can use them in different ways. And the third part will be layered texture, and this will be a step further. And if you understand part 1 and part 2, this will be actually not that difficult, because the principles are the same. What we just do is taking these different textures and overlay them to each other and things like that. That we will use material functions, and I will show you how you do this in the next part. So this will be a step up. For what can you use this? As example, if you want to use an opacity mask, however you don't want to have you still want also a transparent material, but it's not possible with this material here on its own. It's possible by creating material layers to make a see-through material with an opacity mask. Or you have two textures that you want to put over each other. Maybe you have a stone that has moss over it. That's an example how you can use it. Or you have an old house, and ivy is grown over it, so you don't have to create the ivy separately in a separate mesh. You can do this with overlaid materials and so on and so on. And really, with this we can create very interesting materials. And if you know how to use overlaid layered materials, you will see you can create really amazing stuff on your own without needing to find something on Google or even pay for someone else to create it for you. So I hope you look forward to part 3, and thank you for watching part 2. I hope you really learned something here, some useful stuff here. Thank you for watching, and please tune in for the next part.